On this Monday night, Icelandic ice cave collapse. A glacier tour turns deadly.
What happened was a completely avoidable tragedy.
Why experts say these expeditions are becoming more dangerous. Russia's revenge. The new bombardment pummeling Ukraine's power grid. Immigration U-turn. Are the feds considering cutting the number of new permanent residents? Plus, to boldly go where no one has gone in decades. One giant leap for commercial space travel.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. Iceland is known the world over as the land of fire and ice, making it a popular tourist destination for Canadians. But over the weekend, that natural beauty turned deadly, raising questions about what some describe as a loosely regulated industry. A tour group visiting an ice cave in southeastern Iceland was caught off guard when tons of ice came crashing down around them. One person, an American tourist, was killed, another was injured. Seasoned mountain guides and glaciologists tell Global News that tour companies are essentially tripping over each other, all trying to find the best ice caves, sometimes at great risk. Eric Sorensen explains.
The collapse happened in an ice canyon in one of the largest glaciers in Iceland. An ice wall collapsed on two Americans, killing one man, badly injuring a woman. Rescuers had to climb down with stretchers and equipment, among them Einar Sigurdsson.
So we are basically focusing on helping the injured person.
The injured woman was carried hundreds of meters to a helicopter and is reported in stable condition. It was thought two more people were trapped and rescuers dug with ice picks for hours, but officials miscounted and the other 21 tourists were safe.
100 tons of ice that were also fallen, so only those two being struck was a big blessing.
The rescue is very challenging. Being on a glacier, says the local police chief, it was difficult to get to the area. The accident has cast a harsh light on an industry that promotes spectacular tours that can be more dangerous in the summer because glaciers shift and melt more quickly.
The idea that companies are bringing tourists to this glacier in the summer to see ice caves is incredibly risky and dangerous.
M. Jackson is a glaciologist. She says the accident was preventable and no one's taking responsibility.
I think the government has to step in here and regulate this. There cannot be ice cave tourism in the summer on glaciers. Glaciers inherently are dangerous, and they're only going to get more so with increasing climatic changes.
Sigurdsson, both a first responder and a mountain guide, says he doesn't risk tours in many of the ice caves during the summer.
It is very hard to know everything what is going on in the ice. It's really alive, I would say, is one of the more dangerous part of mountain guiding.
A land of both ice and fire, with another volcanic eruption just days ago west of the large glacier fields, Iceland depends on its dramatic natural wonders to boost its economy. But with ice caves, the dangers are greatest in the summer, when most tourists, including thousands of Canadians, visit the country. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Ukrainians woke up overnight to what officials there are calling Russia's largest aerial assault since launching its full-scale invasion 2.5 years ago. This strike hit a water reservoir and power plant near Kyiv. Russia unleashed more than 230 missiles and drones. Most were intercepted, but at least 7 people were killed across Ukraine. The bombardments mostly focused on the country's energy infrastructure. As Redmond Shannon reports, the Russian air assault comes 3 weeks after Ukraine launched its own offensive inside Russian territory.
More than 900 days into the war, Ukrainians still find joy, even as they shelter from another attack. The head of Ukraine's Air Force says this was the largest aerial bombardment of the war, Russia firing more than 200 missiles and drones into Ukraine. He said 85% were intercepted, but many were not. Communities struck in places like Dnipro and further south in Zaporizhia. This woman says she didn't even recognize her brother's body. Russia's attack focused on Ukraine's power system. Since March, Moscow has pivoted to hitting power generation rather than transmission. Blackouts have become increasingly common.
Life is becoming more and more difficult, and it's expected to get worse because the temperatures will decline as winter comes.
Repairing power stations takes time and can be undone with another strike. The industry in Ukraine says it needs more spare parts and better interconnectivity with Europe.
Every 100 megawatt helps Ukraine now, and it will help to go through the next several months.
Volodymyr Zelenskyy says more air defense is needed too. He wants more long-range missiles from the West and the permission to strike at launch sites deep inside Russia. Ukraine appears to be using drones like this to punch back, hitting a Russian apartment building 800 kilometers from the border. Local officials say several people were injured. Over the weekend, Zelenskyy claimed Ukrainian troops have advanced 3 kilometers as part of their incursion into Russia's Kursk region. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
And among those killed in Ukraine, an employee of the Reuters news agency. British national Ryan Evans was a safety advisor and a former soldier. The 38-year-old was part of a 6-person team reporting from Ukraine. Their hotel in the eastern city of Kramatorsk was hit by a Russian airstrike on Saturday. 2 other Reuters journalists were also injured and sent to hospital. So far this year, 30 journalists around the world have been killed while conducting their work. That's according to Reporters Without Borders. More than a third of those killed were in Gaza and the West Bank. Around 580 journalists and media workers have also been detained this year worldwide. Israel launched a new round of airstrikes in Gaza and expanded its evacuation orders. The Hamas-run health ministry says at least 7 people were killed in an Israeli strike on Gaza's largest city. Israel's military also ordered the evacuation of parts of the central Gazan city of Dar al-Bala, one of its most populated areas. That's forced hundreds of injured Palestinians to flee Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital, one of Gaza's last functioning medical facilities. Israel has not ordered the hospital's evacuation, but patients and others sheltering there fear it could be targeted. The UN says most of Gaza's 2 million residents are now confined to an area that's roughly 40 square kilometers, about a quarter of the size of Moncton, New Brunswick. An Israeli drone strike also hit southern Lebanon today, stoking fears of an all-out regional war. Just yesterday, attacks erupted with Hezbollah in the biggest cross-border exchange of fire since the war in Gaza began. Israel says it launched 40 airstrikes into southern Lebanon on Sunday, destroying thousands of Hezbollah rocket launchers. Hours later, the Iran-backed militant group fired hundreds of rockets and missiles deep into Israel in what it called the first phase of its response to last month's assassination of its senior commander in Beirut. The federal government is reducing the number of temporary foreign workers allowed into Canada each year over concerns that many end up in low-paying, even exploitative jobs. The Prime Minister says that's unfair to them and to Canadians who are struggling to find work. Comments from the Liberal Party cabinet retreat are also raising questions about another major immigration policy, the fast-growing number of permanent residents. Our Mackenzie Gray joins us now from Halifax. Mackenzie.
It would be a stunning reversal of a signature Liberal policy, Jeff. The Prime Minister saying he's considering slashing the number of permanent residents admitted to Canada.
We're looking at the various streams to make sure that as we move forward, Canada remains a place that is positive in its support for immigration.
The permanent resident stream has exploded under the Liberals. In 2016, Canada admitted 296,000 permanent residents annually. In 2025, that number will be 500,000, a 59% increase.
I've heard directly from Canadians about where they see the direction of immigration going, and I think they're asking us to adjust.
Canadians' attitudes have soured on Liberal immigration policy, with a Leger poll saying 60% of Canadians believe too many newcomers have been admitted.
What the government is trying to do is to find that balance between bringing people in who we need and making sure that the concerns that people have about existing infrastructure are met.
Infrastructure like housing and healthcare under strain from the massive run-up in not just permanent residents, but also temporary immigration, which the Liberals took new steps to limit. Next month, low-wage workers won't be hired in cities with unemployment rates above 6%. Unemployment for youth and immigrants both nearly double the general rate, pushing the Liberals to make those immigration changes and economic concerns also at the heart of their other major announcement.
We will be introducing a 100% tariff on Chinese-made electric vehicles and a 25% tariff on Chinese steel and aluminum.
Trudeau aligning EV policy with the Americans, which could lead to retaliatory tariffs from the Chinese.
It is in Canada's interest to impose tariffs on Chinese EVs. At the same time, I think it's important that we engage pragmatically with China.
While the Liberals have put forward substantial new policies, the overarching political question remains, Jeff. Is Justin Trudeau the person best placed to sell the new look Liberal message and dig the party out of a 20-point hole to the Conservatives?
All right, Mackenzie Gray in Halifax tonight. Thanks, Mac. Canadians who rely on the railways for their commute or business are feeling some relief. After a 4-day shutdown, work has resumed along the Canadian National and Canadian Pacific Kansas City rail lines. But how long that network will remain operational is unclear. Heather Yerkes-West explains.
A new week off to a much better start for commuters, especially in Canada's 3 largest cities.
Very glad. Yeah, very happy. Last week was tough because I had to hop in a couple of trains to get to downtown. West Coast is a big relief.
With CN and CPKC Rail and its unionized workers heading to binding arbitration later this week, trains across the country are moving again.
For us, the most important thing is getting back to powering the economy. That's the primary thing we do at CN. That's what we wake up every day to do.
Still, plenty of uncertainty remains. The Teamsters Union is appealing Ottawa's decision to send the dispute to the Canada Industrial Relations Board, vowing, if necessary, to take their concerns all the way to the country's highest court.
Well, what the minister did here in this last week, it's unconstitutional. I consider it illegal. He took away unionized workers' rights in Canada for free collective bargaining.
We took a decision that we believe was in the public interest and in workers' interest. Those are major economic consequences, and they're also major consequences in terms of salaries.
It's estimated the 4-day disruption cost Canada's economy more than $1 billion, with the country's reputation as a reliable international trading partner taking a hit too. The trains may be moving again, but the companies estimate it will be at least a week, if not more, before the system can move through its backlog. Jeff?
Heather Yerkes-West in Calgary. Thanks, Heather. And for the second time this summer, Calgary is under a water emergency. The city reimposed strict guidelines, placing residents under Stage 4 outdoor water restrictions as crews shut down and repair one of Calgary's largest water mains following a major rupture back in June. The city says it needs to reduce water usage by about 100 million litres a day. If that can't be achieved, there's a chance underground reservoirs could run dry, leading to another boil water advisory. Park and Fly, a popular airport parking service, is warning Canadian customers their personal information may have been compromised in a data breach. Park and Fly says about 1 million customers' files were accessed by a third party without authorization. The leak happened between July 11th and July 13th and may have included basic contact information as well as Aeroplan and CAA numbers. The company says no financial information was involved. Questioning qualifications. Coming up, how the federal government wants to fix the flaws in its Indigenous procurement program. To an update now on a global news investigation we first reported last week. The federal government policy that's fueling confusion over who should qualify for a multi-billion-dollar program intended to boost Indigenous businesses. The government now admits that improvements are needed and it wants to transform the procurement process. Melissa Ridgen joins us with the details. So, Melissa, it sounds like the government is attempting to correct course here, but Indigenous leaders are also raising concerns.
That's right, Jeff. Ottawa admits they've done a poor job at making sure actual Indigenous-owned businesses were getting contracts under this program. But they say they started making improvements in 2022 and will work with Indigenous organizations to close remaining loopholes. This will include getting a handle on who is and isn't Indigenous, and that will prove tricky.
Canada deals with the Assembly of First Nations, representing First Nations communities and those with Indian status. the Métis National Council and several provincial Métis governments in Western Canada, and Inuit Taperet Kanatami as the national voice for Inuit. Also in this mix is the Congress of Aboriginal People, CAP as it's called, representing Indigenous people not covered by those organizations. However, those First Nations, Inuit, and Métis groups also accuse CAP of representing people who claim to be Indigenous through one ancestor hundreds of years ago, something CAP denies.
I've seen the documentation, and it's not easy to apply, and you can apply, but it's not easy to get in there at all. It's not.
People pretending to be Indigenous was central to an identity fraud summit in Winnipeg in May.
It's going to come to an end, this thievery, this misuse of Indigenous identity that you could so easily steal from the true Indigenous people.
And steal procurement contracts meant to support Indigenous businesses. Census numbers confirm the problem. From 2006 to 2016, in Quebec alone, the number of people claiming to be Métis exploded 150%. It's so easy to be Métis there that a non-Indigenous Global News reporter paid $65, clicked a button saying she swears to be Métis, and a Métis card arrived in the mail in days.
The Congress of Aboriginal People accepts many of the so-called Eastern Métis in Quebec, as well as a group that used to call themselves Labrador Métis, but now identify as Southern Inuit, called Nunatukavut. First Nations, Inuit, and Métis leaders reject both.
There are people, there are grassroots people.
Quebec has been trying to be Métis for how long now? They lost every court case.
This is a group of settlers pretending to be an Inuit.
There are signs Ottawa might be re-examining its relationship with CAP, disinviting them from a Women and Gender Equality Summit.
They're upstairs, they're doing policies, they're talking about strategies, and here we are, right here. Yeah. It's frustrating.
Frustrating, too, for those sitting with a group they believe supports pretendians.
The right to self-identify as an Indigenous person should not be used as a tool to harm the rights and interests of First Nations by taking away rights and resources intended for the original stewards of these lands.
The challenge for Ottawa in protecting those rights will be to navigate an intensifying identity battle the Liberals helped create by being too accepting of people imagining themselves as Indigenous. But to close loopholes in government programs vulnerable to exploitation by non-Indigenous interests, the identity issue has to be solved. Jeff?
All right, Melissa Ridgen in Winnipeg. Thanks, Melissa. Double teaming still ahead. How did this former Blue Jay play for two teams in a single game? In Pakistan, at least 73 people were killed in a wave of coordinated separatist attacks. Gunmen attacked police stations, rail lines, and highways. In the deadliest assault, militants killed 22 civilians after forcing them out of their vehicles and then checking their IDs. Police say people from Punjab were singled out and shot dead. Many vehicles were also set on fire. The Baluch Liberation Army has claimed responsibility. It's one of several insurgent groups in the region demanding the province's independence from the central government in Islamabad. In eastern Sudan, more than 60 people have been killed after torrential rains caused a dam to burst. Residents are digging graves and frantically searching for the missing. Tens of thousands are now displaced. The heavy rain is exacerbating the humanitarian crisis brought on by 16 months of civil war. Millions of people have been forced from their homes, and multiple states have declared famine. Up next, SpaceX prepares for one of its most daring missions yet. Welcome back. A former Toronto Blue Jay was part of an historic change-up today. Danny Jansen is now the first player in MLB history to play for both teams in the same game. He was at the plate when the Jays took on the Boston Red Sox back in June, but that game was suspended due to rain. Jansen was then traded to the Red Sox, and the game was rescheduled and resumed today. Save that one for baseball trivia night. SpaceX has become a heavy hitter in the space race, leading the way in commercial space travel. And this week, the company is launching its Polaris Dawn mission. If all goes to plan, it will be the first commercial spacewalk ever. Mike Armstrong explains.
It's one part of space travel that hasn't changed much for about 4 decades.
The spacesuit is getting an upgrade. The Polaris Dawn crew, set to launch Tuesday out of Florida, will be wearing and testing a brand new extravehicular activity suit, or EVA suit, one designed by SpaceX for much more than fashion.
SpaceX does not take this lightly. They know they need EVA capability, the knowledge of the operations and the suit in order to fulfill their long-term dream of potentially populating another planet someday.
The Polaris Dawn crew is set to go about 1,400 kilometers out from Earth, about 3 times further than the International Space Station. At that distance, there are bigger challenges, there's more radiation, and more micrometeorites.
They're going to be farther than pretty much any human, with the exception, of course, of the Apollo missions to the moon.
The mission will also include a spacewalk done in a new way. There's no airlock, so the entire capsule will be depressurized. 2 astronauts will take turns going out, but in fact, all 4 will be exposed to the vacuum of space.
The EVA is definitely the spacewalk is definitely the riskiest of all the things that they're doing.
EV1 is transitioning for egress.
Now, another big difference with this mission is the financing. It was funded by SpaceX and one of the men on board. Billionaire entrepreneur Jared Isaacman is the mission commander.
Can you give sort of a ballpark estimate of how much money you've invested into this program so far?
Not a chance. Good question, though.
One of the benefits of writing checks for the mission is that Isaacman got to hand-pick the crew. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Washington.
And that is Global National for this Monday night. I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight's Your Canada is Kanaka Creek Regional Park in Maple Ridge, British Columbia. We love seeing Your Canada, so please keep emailing your photos to globalnational@globalnews.ca. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you back here again tomorrow. Have a great night.